Chapter 6 of Red Shoes and an Allmight Wristwatch. Shota had a terrible night. Half of it was that he had been in a bad mood from the start, still anxious and upset that he hadn't seen Deku the night before, and half of it was because the villains kept creeping out and requiring Eraserhead to deal with them. By the time he had finished with the last group, or what he hoped was the last group, it was nearly 3 a.m. Class 1A was going to get a self-work so he could nap through class. Shota dragged himself onwards with a sigh. Why did he do this to himself? He should have just tied the boy down the first night he found him and let the police deal with him. With aching limbs, he made his way up to the side of the building that had become their unofficial designated meeting place. His eyes were already adjusted to the dark, and quickly picked out the small bag where Izuku had first tried to jump off the edge, and Shota had stopped him. The kid had done it. Evidence. Intrigued, Shota went to grab the bag when he heard a sniff. He whirled, ready to chew out Deku for getting hurt again, but instead saw a small figure burrowed against the opposite wall. Hello? He approached carefully, capture weapon at the ready. Luminous eyes stared up at him from under a too large All-Might hoodie. Are you Deku's friend? What had Deku done now? Shota resisted the growl, or to hit something, and instead crouched low, trying to look as unthreatening as possible. Yes, I'm Deku's friend. Did Deku leave you here? She nodded. Deku saved me from the bad guy who hurt me. He said he had to run. Shota's heart squeezed painfully. Do you know what bad men? She shook her head. Okay, why don't we go down and find someplace safe, okay? Her big eyes stared at him. Should we wait for Deku? Shota felt his breath hitch in his throat. After we get you somewhere safe, I'll go find him, okay? The little girl nodded and stood. Shota tried not to react at the sight of her arms and legs completely bandaged. She weighed practically nothing in his arms. She held tightly to a beat-up All-Might backpack. I'm Aizawa, he said quietly. What's your name? Eri, the girl said. Eri seemed scared to leave him, but Shota couldn't help the situation. He managed to get Midnight to convince the little girl that she was safe, and Midnight helped put her into a dreamless sleep. Aizawa, are you sure you're okay? We could get some of the others to help you search. Shota shook his head. If the kid has managed to escape, whoever these people are, then he'll just run at the sight of someone else. I'm taking Hound Dog, and I've got the police already on high alert and patrolling. I'll let you know if that changes. Midnight nodded. I won't let her out of my sight, she promised. Shota thought of how he should have made that promise about Deku, and ran a tired hand over his face. Thanks, was all he managed to mutter. The sun was rising by the time Shota got back onto the streets. He started back at the rooftop where he found Eri. In the daylight, he could see some dark splotches of blood near the corner, but not where she had been sitting. Deku had been hurt. Hound Dog, I've got something. The other teacher took a bit longer to get to the rooftop, but one sniff and he was off. Shota struggling to keep up. They wound farther and farther through dark alleys until they stopped at a much larger, darker stain. "No," Shota whispered. "No, please." More sense. Blood goes with. Maybe dead, maybe alive. With that comforting statement, Hound Dog darted off. He stopped at the beginning of a street. That one. It was quiet. It was a quiet, unassuming house. Shota knew better than to storm up and demand Deku back, but it was all he could do to keep out of sight. Melissa strangely never mind. Right. Let the police know to start a 24-hour watch on this location. I'm going to get the intel that the boy collected and see what we're dealing with before we storm that place. I'll need you to testify to a judge about the evidence we found to help get a warrant. Understood, Hound Dog snarled. This song is actually quite fitting to this part of the fan fiction. I find it funny. Izuku woke to the cold water splashing him in the face. He spluttered, blinking until Overhaul's face came into focus. The plague mask seemed less frightening up close, but Izuku's stomach sank at the knowledge he'd failed. Disgusting, Overhaul muttered. All right, boy. Who knows about this? Izuku shook his head. No one. Just me. Overhaul snorted. 2 men were beside him. Shin, he commanded. Who knows about us? Shin parroted. No one, Izuku said. He felt a slight buzzing in his head as he said it. A truth quirk? Surprising. Overhaul turned back to him. Continue, Shin. Where's Eri? A rooftop. It was a truth quirk. Izuku had meant to say that he didn't know. A rooftop. Which one? A rooftop of a building. What is the address of the rooftop? I don't know. He knew everything by sight, but he had no clue about roads or directions, which was lucky. The interrogation went back and forth. There was some merit to it working alone, Izuku figured, since most of their questions centered around figuring out who he was working with, who might have Eri, and where she might be. And he had no idea. Eventually, though, he could tell that they were losing patience. Maybe this will loosen your tongue, more than Shin does, Overhaul hissed. He took off his glove. Do you know what my quirk is, boy? He knew it was something painful, and that all of the Yakuza thugs were scared of him, but not what it was. Izuku shook his head. You'll see firsthand. Izuku was ripped into pieces. Awful, burning pain that didn't seem to stop, just as painfully. He felt himself being put together, like a tiny puzzle pieces smashed into place. He gasped out a breath once he felt like he was able to. What did you do to me? He gasped. My quirk allows me to tear something down and rebuild it. Most of the time I rebuild it right. Sometimes I miss pieces. I wonder how many times I will rebuild you before I forget a key piece. Izuku half sobbed. I can't help you. Overhaul clicked his tongue. You took one of our quirk-stealing bullets to the shoulder. What was your quirk? I'm quirkless, Izuku said. He had hoped Overhaul would be less interested in him after that, but if anything, the guy's eyes went wide. Oh, hurry. We never considered using quirkless genes. Prepare the equipment to take samples. The other man in the white coat began to turn to his supplies. Izuku swallowed and closed his eyes. Inko looked tried to look as intimidating as possible as she approached the police desk. "Yes, how can I help you?" The man seemed half distracted. A lot of the police were milling about, seemingly all trying to arrange something, though Izuku couldn't tell what. I need to report a missing person. My son is missing. Name, Midoriya Izuku. Age, 15. Quirk, he's quirkless. The policeman looked up. "Ma'am, do you know the statistics of runaways that are quirkless?" "Izuku wouldn't do that," Inko said fiercely. The man seemed like he was trying to stop himself from rolling his eyes. "Ma'am, quirkless individuals are unreliable. It could be that your son finally reached his tipping point. He has been has he been disappearing for long periods of time or making new friends?" Inko thought about how tired he always was, and the hours that Izuku spent in his after-school job. I don't think so," she said. "He's a good boy. He always wanted to be a hero. He wouldn't leave me." "Submit a picture of him for me, and we can get that posted." Inko wanted to scream. "That's not good enough," she snapped. "My son is missing, and that means something bad has happened. A picture posted on a bulletin board somewhere is not going to do anything to help that. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down, or I will have to ask you to leave." Inko pressed a hand over her mouth, holding down a sob. The picture she had in her shaking hand, was a few years old. Izuku had his shy, half-embarrassed smile curving his lips, his Allmight watch, his bright red shoes he loved. "Ma'am," a hoarse voice behind her made Inko spin. A tired, scruffy-looking man was staring at the picture in her hands. "Who is that?" "My son." Inko blinked away her tears. "He's missing. Have you seen him?" "I may have." The man looked at her. "What is your son's name?" "Izuku Midoriya." Does he go by any other names?" Inko blinked at the unexpected question. "No, not that I..." "Deku?" Inko felt her face spasm. His middle school friends, or rather, bullies, used to call him that. "How do you..." "Come with me." The man spun away without warning, leaving Inko scrambling to follow him deeper into the police station until they reached a large conference room. No one seemed to question the man, despite him having no badge or other identifying marks. "I believe we discovered the boy's identity," the scruffy man announced. Inko gasped at the room full of official-looking police officers and heroes. "This is the boy's mother. Miss Midoriya?" Inko blinked as Allmight himself spoke her name. "Allmight," she breathed shakily. "How do you know my..." The scruffy man was also staring at Allmight. "What?" I may also have an idea who this child is." Allmight seemed almost sheepish, not in his vigilante capacity. Inko swallowed heavily. "Vigilante," she repeated. "Has Izuku been..." "Yes." The scruffy man's voice softened a little. "He's been trying to help people, and he's succeeded many times. We believe, though, that he's gotten himself taken. Did he tell you any details about what he was working on? Any info about him that can help?" Inko hugged her arms around herself. What kind of mother was she, that she had no clue Izuku was doing this? "No," she whispered. He's been getting more fit, and he's always tired, but I thought it was just a combination of school and his job." "Where's his school and job?" Inko gave them the details. And I heard you say he was quirkless. Is that true? Inko felt tears begin to well up. Yes, he has no way to defend himself. One of the policemen stood. Eraser, we have enough from her. We need to move on to the next stages. Have her wait outside. Inko found herself shuffled outside. The scruffy man, Eraserhead, hesitated before going back in. Your son saved a little girl's life, he told her. A little girl who was suffering and in danger. He is very brave, and we will do everything in our power to get him back to you. Please. Inko closed her eyes, sitting down heavily in the chair in the hall. He's all I have. This, is the there's only one chapter after this, so yeah. I don't know how this is supposed to end, but, chapter 7 will be right up.